Close your eyes, and let the world you know fade gently into shadow. Feel the soft pull of history's tide, drawing you backward through centuries, through millennia, through the long night of human time, past the concrete skylines and electric hum of the modern age, past the wind-worn stones of medieval castles, past the quiet rise and fall of empires, whose names are now little more than echoes in dust. Keep drifting until even the records vanish, until you stand at the threshold of memory itself. In this in-between place, the light is dim and warm, not sunlight, but the glow of firelight on the faces of people long gone. You see them in glimpses, a hand chiseling patterns into stone, a figure holding a clay vessel just so, as if it contains something more precious than water. Somewhere, someone watches the sky with intent, mapping its slow and solemn dance. Here, the air itself feels charged with meaning. These people knew things we do not. They built things we still cannot fully explain. And in their silence, they left us puzzles. Some of these puzzles have sat patiently beneath soil and sand for thousands of years. Others have waited under the ocean's dark weight, or in forgotten corners of storerooms, or in plain sight, misunderstood. They are the artifacts and sites we will journey to tonight. 12 ancient discoveries that modern science, for all its brilliance, still cannot fully unravel. Each one exists in the thin space between certainty and doubt, between the part of history we can see clearly and the part forever lost in shadow. They are not the loud triumphs of the past, the ones carved in monumental inscriptions or chronicled in royal decrees. No, they are whispers, whispers that, for reasons we may never fully grasp, have survived long enough to find us. Some seem almost impossibly ahead of their time, as though they were fragments of a future misplaced into the past. Others feel as though they have slipped sideways from a parallel story, one where human history unfolded along a different path, and still others are so beautifully ordinary in form, that their true mystery hides in plain sight. Science approaches these puzzles with tools, with carbon dating, spectroscopy, linguistic analysis, satellite imaging, and yet the answers often dissolve just as they seem within reach. Every theory spawns another question. Every measurement leads to a fork in the road where the path forward is unclear. For those of us who wander through the corridors of history, this is not a frustration, but a gift, because mystery is not a flaw in the human record, it is part of its heartbeat. Without it, history would be nothing more than a ledger of names and dates. It is in the unknown that we find the invitation to imagine, and so tonight, we will imagine. We will walk the dust of temples older than agriculture. We will stand in desert plains, etched with lines that can only be seen from the sky. We will hold in our minds' hands a fragment of ancient machinery whose precision mocks the centuries it has crossed to reach us. We will read the pages of a book written in a language no one speaks, perhaps no one ever has, but we will do so gently. This is not the hurried, feverish search of an archaeologist under a looming deadline. This is the slow, measured journey of a night traveler, content to let the mind wander and the spirit rest. You do not need to solve these mysteries tonight. You need only to let them unfold before you, one by one, like constellations appearing in a darkening sky. And as we move through them, we will keep watch for a pattern, a thread weaving each into the others, a quiet rhythm beneath the individual beats, because if there is one truth older than any of these discoveries, it is this: history does not exist in fragments. Every artifact, every ruin, every inexplicable carving, is part of a story far larger than itself. You may find, as you listen, that the borders between light and shadow begin to blur, facts and possibilities may overlap until you are no longer sure which is which. This is as it should be. The mind rests best when it is neither straining for certainty nor drowning in chaos, but drifting in that deep twilight between the two. Our first step will take us into the blue-green waters off a small Greek island, to a shipwreck swallowed by the sea 2,000 years ago. There, among amphorae and bronze statues, divers found something no one expected, a machine of gears and wheels so delicate, so precise, that even today we can scarcely imagine how it was built. A fragment of science, decades, perhaps centuries, ahead of its time. The Antikythera mechanism, a timekeeper, an astronomical computer, or something else entirely. It waits for us now, its corroded brass still whispering secrets beneath layers of centuries-old salt. And so our journey begins, into the quiet, into the mystery, into the long night where forgotten worlds still speak. The water off the island of Antikythera is the kind that seems to hold secrets in suspension. A shade of deep blue that shifts almost imperceptibly to green near the shallows. It looks calm from the surface, but below it is a library of shipwrecks, each vessel a chapter in a story lost to the waves. In the spring of 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers sought shelter from a storm near the island. They were not explorers or historians, just men making a living, their days dictated by the ebb and flow of the sea. One of them dove beneath the waves to check the seabed for sponges, and found himself staring at something entirely unexpected, the skeletal remains of a massive ship, its timbers now a reef for swaying plants and darting fish. Over the weeks that followed, the divers and their support crew braved depth, darkness, and dangerous currents to bring the ship's treasures to the surface. Bronze statues, marble sculptures, amphorae, heavy with the scent of centuries, all catalogued, admired, and sent to Athens. But among these relics was one that, at first, drew little attention. A lump of corroded bronze, no larger than a shoebox, fused into a rough mass with fragments of wood. It would take decades before anyone realized this was no mere chunk of debris, for within that corroded shell were gears, dozens of them, interlocked with a precision that defied everything historians thought they knew about ancient technology. Today we call it the Antikythera mechanism. It is in essence an ancient analog computer, built to predict the positions of the sun, moon, and possibly the planets, as well as eclipses and calendar cycles. Crafted in the 1st or 2nd century BCE, it predates the next known comparable technology by over 1,000 years. Imagine the craftsmanship. The gears are cut with teeth, so fine, they seem the work of a modern machinist, not a craftsman working in a Mediterranean workshop 2 millennia ago. The inscriptions on its casing are in Greek, instructions perhaps, or explanations of the dials. Turn the main handle, and the machine would once have spun its wheels in quiet synchrony, telling the future of the sky with a grace and accuracy that would impress even now. And yet the questions begin the moment we acknowledge what it is. Who made it? How did they possess such advanced mechanical knowledge? Was it the product of a lone genius, or the work of a tradition now lost entirely? Some point to the polymath Archimedes, whose engineering feats were legendary even in his own time. Others suggest it was built in the sphere of Hipparchus, the great astronomer of Rhodes. Still others imagine an entire lineage of such devices, now vanished, with this single example surviving only because it happened to be aboard a doomed ship. The more we study it, the more enigmatic it becomes. X-ray imaging in the early 21st century revealed the density and arrangement of the gears in unprecedented detail. 37 bronze wheels, each precisely cut, meshing with the others to model celestial motions. The inscriptions suggest it tracked the Metonic cycle, a 19-year period, after which lunar phases repeat on the same calendar dates, as well as the Saros cycle of eclipses. Some researchers believe it even included a display of the ancient Olympic Games schedule. If true, this was more than a scientific instrument. It was a bridge between the heavens and human ritual, between cosmic order and the rhythms of daily life. And yet, this bridge exists in isolation. We have found no other complete example. We have no ancient workshop filled with half-built mechanisms, no series of written manuals explaining their use. In all the surviving texts of Greek engineering, nothing quite like it is described in detail. The Antikythera mechanism stands alone, as if it were a message from a forgotten branch of history. Theories multiply in the absence of certainty. Perhaps such devices were once common among the learned elite, their bronze gears melted down during times of scarcity. Perhaps their manufacture was a guarded secret, passed from master to apprentice until the chain was broken. Or perhaps, as some more speculative voices suggest, this was the sole work of a single mind, a kind of ancient Da Vinci, whose brilliance vanished without a successor. Science, for all its tools, cannot yet fully reconstruct its origin story. The corroded fragments resist complete analysis, and the missing pieces, believed to be at least 2/3 of the original device, leave gaps in our understanding of its full capabilities. What remains, however, is enough to humble us. It reminds us that the line between the modern and the ancient is thinner than we might like to believe. Picture it: a scholar 2,000 years ago, hunched over a table in a workshop, lit by oil lamps. He adjusts the teeth of a gear with a file, tests the smoothness of its rotation, and smiles when it fits perfectly with another wheel. Outside, the night sky moves silently overhead, the very motions his creation will soon model. In that moment, there is no gap of centuries between him and us. There is only the shared human impulse to measure, to predict, to understand. And yet, for all the beauty of its construction, the Antikythera mechanism also whispers of fragility. Knowledge, no matter how advanced, can be lost. A single shipwreck, a war, a shifting of priorities, and centuries can pass before such brilliance is rediscovered. When it was first brought to the surface in 1900, encrusted in limestone and marine growth, no one on the dock in Athens could have guessed they were holding a key to one of history's deepest enigmas. Even today, after decades of research, that key turns in a lock we cannot fully open. Perhaps that is as it should be. The night needs its stars, and history needs its mysteries. For if we solved every question, what would pull us forward? What would whisper to us across the centuries, urging us to keep looking, keep wondering? Our journey will take us to many such places, where stone, metal, and earth carry the weight of questions we may never answer. From this corroded cluster of gears, we now step onto dry land, into a sunlit plateau in southern Turkey. There, beneath layers of soil, lies a temple so old it rewrites the timeline of human civilization. Its stones stand in deliberate patterns, its carvings staring back at us across 12,000 years. Göbekli Tepe awaits, a place built before the plow, before the written word, perhaps even before the story of civilization as we tell it truly began. High on a dusty plateau in southeastern Turkey, the horizon stretches in muted shades of gold and pale brown. The wind here is constant, carrying the dry scent of wheat fields and the faint grit of ancient soil. At first glance, this seems like an ordinary hill among many, nothing to hint at its extraordinary secret. But beneath your feet lies something so old, so deliberate, that it has forced historians and archaeologists to redraw the map of human history. This is Göbekli Tepe, Potbelly Hill in Turkish, and it is older than the pyramids of Giza by more than 7,000 years, older than Stonehenge by 6.5 millennia, older even than the dawn of agriculture itself. Its discovery was almost accidental. In the mid-1990s, a shepherd tending his flock noticed strange stone shapes jutting from the ground, shapes that seemed carved, not natural. Archaeologists, curious but cautious, began digging. What they unearthed defied expectation: enormous T-shaped limestone pillars, arranged in circles, some towering over 16 feet high, and weighing up to 20 tons. But the carvings were something else entirely. Snakes, foxes, vultures, wild boar, animals, etched into the stone with surprising precision. Abstract symbols, geometric patterns, and humanoid forms hinted at a symbolic language we cannot fully read. Each pillar seemed to tell a story, yet no one alive can translate it. What made Göbekli Tepe so astonishing was not just its size or artistry, it was its age. Radiocarbon dating, placed its earliest construction at around 9600 BCE, in the heart of the last ice age's fading grip. According to the history we thought we knew, humans at that time were still hunter-gatherers, living in small mobile groups, without the organizational complexity to build monumental architecture. Agriculture, permanent settlements, and complex religious practices were believed to have come later. But Göbekli Tepe shattered that timeline. Here was a massive ceremonial complex built long before farming took root. Its builders hauled megaliths from quarries, shaped them with flint tools, and set them upright in carefully designed enclosures. This wasn't a temporary campsite, it was a place of gathering, of purpose, of meaning. The prevailing interpretation is that Göbekli Tepe was a temple, a sacred site where scattered groups came together for ritual, perhaps seasonally. But if that's true, it raises an even deeper question. What came first, religion or agriculture? Was it the shared act of worship, the communal ceremonies under these carved pillars, that brought people together in such numbers that farming became necessary to sustain them? If so, it turns our assumptions inside out. Perhaps it was belief, not bread, that seeded civilization, and then just as mysteriously as it rose, Göbekli Tepe was buried. Sometime around 8000 BCE, its builders, or their descendants, covered the site with layers of soil and rubble. This was not the slow work of time and erosion, it was intentional, deliberate. Why would they entomb their masterpiece? Was it an act of preservation, a ritual closure, or a farewell to beliefs no longer held? Theories abound. Some suggest climate change or shifting social structures made the site obsolete. Others whisper of symbolic death, that the hill itself became a kind of monument, a memory sealed away, for reasons we can only guess. The mood here is unlike other archaeological sites. At the pyramids or the Parthenon, one senses ambition, the desire to be seen and remembered. At Göbekli Tepe, the feeling is different, quieter, more introspective, as though you are walking through the dream of a culture whose thoughts we can almost touch but never fully hold. Science continues to probe its mysteries. Ground-penetrating radar suggests there are still dozens of enclosures yet to be excavated, perhaps hundreds of stones lying in wait. Some of the animal carvings seem to align with constellations as they would have appeared 12,000 years ago, suggesting an astronomical awareness far earlier than expected. Others seem to tell seasonal or mythic narratives we can only speculate about. Yet, as with the Antikythera mechanism, the deeper the study, the more the questions multiply. Who coordinated the labor to build such a place in a pre-agricultural world? How did they feed the workers? What beliefs compelled them to carve the same animals and shapes again and again? And why, in the end, did they turn their backs on it? In the calm of the Anatolian evening, when the sun bleeds into the horizon and the plateau turns the color of old parchment, it's easy to imagine the builders still here, their voices carried in the wind, their shadows moving between the stones. Perhaps in their silence lies the answer, and perhaps the answer is meant to remain a mystery. Göbekli Tepe reminds us that history is not a straight line from simple to complex, from primitive to advanced. It loops, it doubles back, it surprises. It shows us that the capacity for beauty, symbolism, and spiritual wonder has been with us far longer than we once believed. From here, our path turns south and east toward the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia. In a land of rivers and empires, archaeologists unearthed something small enough to hold in your hand, yet strange enough to ignite decades of debate. A clay jar lined with copper, with an iron rod in its center, a device that might or might not have carried the spark of ancient electricity. The Tigris River moves slowly through the heart of Iraq, its waters the color of bronze, under the midday sun. Along its banks lie the layered remains of empires, Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Persian, each built upon the bones of the last. In this land, where writing, law, and urban life first took shape, archaeologists have long expected to find the echoes of invention. But in the 1930s, in a dusty village near Baghdad, they found something that didn't quite fit the pattern. It was not a golden idol or an inscribed tablet, but a simple clay jar, about the size of a hand. At first glance, it could have been a container for oil or wine, like thousands of others unearthed across the region. But this vessel held a secret. Inside was a cylinder of copper, sealed at the bottom, and within that, an iron rod. The pieces fit snugly, as if designed for one another, though the materials had corroded over time. When Wilhelm Koenig, the German director of the Baghdad Museum's laboratory, examined it in 1938, he proposed an extraordinary idea, that this was a kind of ancient battery. Fill it with an acidic liquid, such as vinegar or fermented grape juice, and the copper and iron could generate a small electrical current. The notion electrified, quite literally, the popular imagination. Could it be that 2,000 years ago, long before Benjamin Franklin's kite or Edison's bulbs, people here had harnessed the power of electricity? The jar's estimated age, based on associated artifacts, fell between 150 BCE and 250 CE, possibly during the Parthian or Sasanian periods. This was a time of advanced craftsmanship and thriving trade routes, but nothing in the written record speaks of electrical devices, and yet, experiments with replicas of the jar showed that it could indeed produce a modest voltage, enough to give a faint tingle, or perhaps to plate small objects with precious metals. This led to theories. Some suggested that artisans might have used such jars for electroplating, applying a thin layer of gold or silver onto jewelry. Others imagined them used in medicinal treatments, as a kind of early electrotherapy. A few even whispered about religious rituals, where the invisible force of electricity could have been seen as divine, but not everyone agreed. Many archaeologists argued that the jar was simply a storage vessel for scrolls or sacred objects, and that its internal components were coincidental, perhaps repurposed from other materials. The lack of multiple confirmed examples made the electrical theory feel more like an intriguing possibility than a proven fact. What deepens the mystery is that the so-called Baghdad battery is not entirely alone. Similar jars and vessels with metal fittings have been found in the region, though rarely in contexts that confirm their purpose. If they were batteries, they were unlike anything else in the ancient world, isolated sparks in a dark age of technology, without a clear chain of invention leading to or from them. Imagine for a moment what it would mean if the theory is correct. In a dim workshop, 2 millennia ago, an artisan pours a sour fermented liquid into a clay jar. He fits the copper cylinder and iron rod into place, and moments later, a force unseen and silent hums to life. In that moment, he holds a secret known to almost no one else. Does he see it as a tool, or as magic? Does he understand that he has tapped into a principle of nature that will one day light entire cities, or is it simply a clever trick, valuable for a single purpose, and then forgotten? Like so many artifacts in our journey, the Baghdad battery sits on the knife's edge between the ordinary and the extraordinary. Science can replicate its function, but cannot confirm its intent. History provides a stage, but the script remains missing. The jar now rests in a museum display, its copper dulled with age, its iron pitted and fragile. Visitors stand before it, some passing quickly to grander treasures, others lingering with furrowed brows. To some it is just a curiosity, to others, a hint that human history may contain entire chapters of technology we have yet to rediscover. And here once again, the pattern emerges. A single object opens a door to a corridor we cannot fully walk down. Whether that door leads to a lost tradition of craftsmanship, a brief experiment that ended in obscurity, or something stranger still, we cannot say. From the banks of the Tigris, our journey will take us across continents and centuries, to a place where mystery is woven not in copper and clay, but in the threads of a single piece of fabric. It is a relic that some believe carries the imprint of the divine, while others see in it nothing more than the work of medieval forgers. The cathedral in Turin, Italy, holds a silence unlike most others. It is not the stillness of emptiness, but of breath being held. Inside a climate-controlled case, under dim, reverent lighting, lies a length of linen, just over 4 meters long, and a little more than 1 meter wide. It is stained, yellowed with age, and across its weave, faint, yet unmistakable, is the image of a man. The figure appears front and back, as if the cloth once wrapped around him in death. His hair falls to his shoulders, his beard is full. The marks on his body, wounds on his wrists and feet, a gash in his side, traces of scourging, are eerily consistent with the biblical description of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. For centuries, the Shroud of Turin has been both a relic of profound devotion and a subject of unyielding debate. To believers, it is a miraculous image left by the resurrection itself, a moment of divine light burning the likeness of Christ into the fabric. To skeptics, it is a medieval forgery, an artful product of piety or deception, meant to inspire faith or command reverence. The earliest undisputed historical reference to the shroud dates to the mid-14th century, when it appeared in Luray, France. From there, it passed through noble hands, before arriving in Turin in 1578. But the story that it is Christ's burial cloth claims a much older lineage, tracing its journey through centuries of secrecy, wars, and church vaults, back to 1st century Jerusalem. What makes the shroud so compelling is not just the image itself, but how it was made. The figure is not painted in any conventional sense. Microscopic examination shows no brush strokes, no pigment embedded in the linen fibers, as in ordinary art. Instead, the image appears as a subtle change in the surface chemistry of the threads, a kind of discoloration that penetrates only the topmost fibrils. In 1978, a team of scientists from the Shroud of Turin research project, STURP, conducted a detailed examination. They concluded that the image could not be explained by paint, dye, or heat branding. Yet they also found no evidence that it was formed by a burst of radiant energy, as some proponents of the resurrection theory had suggested. Their final statement was cautious. The shroud's image is a mystery. Then, in 1988, a radiocarbon dating test on small samples of the cloth seemed to end the debate, at least for a moment. 3 independent laboratories reported a date range between 1260 and 1390 CE, placing the shroud firmly in the medieval period. Headlines proclaimed it a forgery, crafted in an era known for elaborate relic making, but the story did not close there. Critics of the test argued that the samples were taken from a section of the cloth repaired in the Middle Ages, possibly after damage from a fire. Contamination from centuries of handling, exposure to smoke, and biological residue may also have skewed the results. Subsequent studies have claimed to find pollen grains consistent with plants from the Middle East, traces of rare soil matching that of Jerusalem, and even faint three-dimensional information encoded in the image's intensity. Each piece of evidence seems to point in a different direction. The skeptics remain firm. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and none has yet been given. Believers remain unmoved. Faith is not bound by the limits of scientific replication. Between these two stances, the shroud endures, neither confirmed nor disproven, an object suspended between devotion and doubt. Standing before it, whether in the quiet of the cathedral or in photographs magnified to show every weave, one feels the strange pull of the image. There is a humility to it, no dramatic flourishes, no sharp outlines, just a soft ghostly presence. It is neither fully here, nor fully gone, like the last trace of a dream upon waking. And perhaps that is the true reason it endures in public fascination. For those of faith, it is a relic that brings the sacred into tangible form. For those without, it is a riddle that resists every attempt at final explanation. In both cases, it reminds us that some of history's most powerful objects are defined not by what we know, but by what we cannot resolve. Imagine the shroud's journey through fire in 1532, when molten silver from its reliquary burned symmetrical holes through the fabric, through wars and thefts, when it was spirited away to keep it safe, through centuries of worship, when thousands knelt before it, hoping for a moment of contact with the divine. It has survived every test of time, of science, of skepticism, and still it lies in its glass case, quiet as breath. In the stillness of its chamber, you can almost hear the unspoken question it poses: what if this is real? And an equally haunting echo: what if it is not? From here our path moves from fabric to parchment, from an image of a man to a map of the world. We travel to the Ottoman court of the early 16th century, where a skilled admiral drew a chart that would baffle scholars centuries later, a map depicting lands supposedly unknown at the time, as if he had inherited a memory from an earlier forgotten age. The year is 1513. In the bustling port city of Gallipoli, ships come and go with the wind, carrying goods and stories from across the known world. In a quiet room near the docks, a man leans over a table scattered with vellum, compasses, and ink pots. He is Ahmed Muhyiddin Piri, better known to history as Piri Reis, an Ottoman admiral, navigator, and master cartographer. On the parchment before him, lines arc gracefully across seas, coastlines curve into recognizable shapes, and strange lands appear where, according to the official knowledge of the age, they should not exist. This is no ordinary map. What survives today is only a fragment, roughly 1/3 of the original, preserved in the archives of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. Yet even in this incomplete form, the Piri Reis map has captured imaginations for centuries. It depicts the western coasts of Europe and Africa with surprising accuracy, along with the eastern coastline of South America, lands that had only recently been visited by European explorers. But there is more. At the map's southern edge lies a stretch of landmass that some interpret as the northern coastline of Antarctica, drawn centuries before its official discovery in 1820. Even more provocative, the coastline appears free of the thick ice sheets that have covered it for thousands of years, leading some to speculate about ancient sources of geographical knowledge long since lost. Piri Reis himself left notes on the map, explaining that it was compiled from about 20 earlier charts, some from Arab and Portuguese sources, and others he claimed from maps that dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. If true, this means fragments of cartographic knowledge could have passed quietly through the centuries, copied and recopied by navigators who perhaps did not fully understand the scope of what they were preserving. The map's accuracy in certain areas is striking, especially considering the navigational tools available in the early 16th century. European explorers at the time still struggled with determining longitude, yet parts of Piri Reis's chart seem remarkably precise in proportion and placement. Was this simply a result of careful compilation, or evidence that some of his source maps were far older and more advanced than historians currently believe? Skeptics offer more grounded explanations. The Antarctica coastline might instead represent a distorted version of South America's southern tip, a cartographic stretching caused by the limitations of projecting a three-dimensional Earth onto a two-dimensional surface. The supposed ice-free details could be artistic flourishes, or a misinterpretation of coastal features seen by early voyages to the sub-Antarctic regions. Still, the allure remains. In the popular imagination, the Piri Reis map becomes a relic of a world-spanning maritime culture, perhaps one that existed long before the civilizations we know. It has been linked, sometimes fancifully, to Atlantis, to ancient seafaring empires, even to extraterrestrial visitors. These theories find little support in academic circles, yet they thrive because the map itself refuses to settle neatly into one category. It is neither wholly explicable nor wholly impossible. Consider the human chain behind it. A Greek sailor, in the time of Alexander, might have copied a Phoenician chart onto papyrus. Centuries later, an Arab scholar in Baghdad might have recopied the same coastline onto calfskin. A Portuguese navigator might have carried a version aboard a caravel, noting new harbors along the way. By the time it reached Piri Reis, the map's lineage was already ancient, its origins blurred by the hands and minds that had shaped it. There is poetry in this, the idea that knowledge can drift across cultures and epochs like a bottle tossed into the ocean, arriving centuries later on an entirely different shore. Whether the mysterious southern coastline is a glimpse of lost knowledge or merely an error of projection, the map stands as a testament to the interconnectedness of human exploration. The physical artifact itself is delicate. Faded ink traces coastlines in brown and red, with place names scrawled in Ottoman Turkish. Small illustrations depict ships at sea, fantastical creatures in the water, and brief notes in the margins. Piri Reis's commentary on his sources and the lands they portray. Some of his remarks speak of Portuguese voyages, others of maps from India, and one tantalizingly mentions a chart drawn in the time of Alexander the Great. Standing before the fragment today in Istanbul's archives, the effect is quietly mesmerizing. You can almost hear the creak of timbers, the snap of sails in the wind, the murmur of sailors trading tales of distant coasts. The inked lines become more than representations of geography. They are the distilled memory of journeys, the ghosts of waves crossed and horizons reached. And yet, for all its mystery, the Piri Reis map is also a reminder that discovery is rarely clean or linear. Knowledge is patched together from many hands, subject to distortion and loss as much as to preservation. Whether the southern coast is Antarctica, before the ice, or simply the imagination of a cartographer, piecing together second-hand accounts, it keeps alive a question that history cannot close. From these inked coastlines, we will now rise into the air, far above the earth, to view a mystery that can only be seen in its entirety from the sky. Across the desert plains of Peru lie colossal geoglyphs etched into the ground, their purpose as elusive as their scale is vast. The Peruvian desert is a place of silence, so deep, it feels like another element, a stillness that seems to swallow sound, leaving only the dry whisper of wind across sand and stone. Stretching over 500 square kilometers, the Nazca Plain is a canvas of pale earth and dark, oxidized gravel. From the ground it appears barren, featureless, but from above it transforms into something extraordinary. Etched into the desert floor are hundreds of enormous designs, some simple like straight lines stretching for kilometers, others complex, forming vast trapezoids, spirals, and shapes that only reveal themselves fully from the air. And among them, scattered like signatures on the earth itself, are figures of animals and plants, a hummingbird with wings outstretched, a monkey with a coiled tail, a spider with impossibly long legs, a condor with wings spanning more than 100 meters. These are the Nazca lines, created between 500 BCE and 500 CE by the Nazca culture, or so the dating suggests. The lines were made by removing the top layer of dark reddish stones to reveal the lighter soil beneath. This contrast, combined with the region's arid climate and lack of wind, has preserved the designs for over 1,000 years. From the moment they were first brought to the world's attention in the 1920s and 30s, largely thanks to pilots flying over the region, the question has been the same. Why? One of the most enduring theories is that the lines formed part of astronomical calendars or observation sites. Some of the straight lines appear to align with the solstices or other celestial events. The shapes may have represented constellations, mapping the heavens onto the earth as part of agricultural planning or ceremonial cycles. Another theory focuses on water, a precious and often scarce resource in this desert landscape. The Nazca people built complex underground aqueducts, known as puquios, to channel water for irrigation. Some researchers believe the lines and shapes were part of water-related rituals, perhaps walked along in processions, their sheer scale a form of offering to the gods for rain and fertility. And then there are the more imaginative explanations, that the lines were meant to be seen by beings in the sky, or even by visitors from beyond the earth. While mainstream archaeology finds no evidence for such claims, the sheer fact that the designs are fully visible only from above keeps the idea alive in the popular imagination. What is certain is that creating them was no small feat. Without aerial perspective, the Nazca people would have had to rely on precise planning, using ropes, stakes, and geometry to scale up small designs to monumental proportions. This required not only technical skill, but also a shared cultural vision, a reason compelling enough to move thousands of tons of rock in the heat of the desert sun. Walking among the lines at ground level is a strange experience. From up close, they are shallow furrows, barely more than paths cleared through stone. It is only when you gain altitude, climbing a viewing tower, or better yet, taking to the sky, that their full form emerges. The hummingbird stretches gracefully across the desert, the monkey curls into a playful spiral, the lines once meaningless become messages. Messages to whom? That is the question that lingers. Some believe they were intended for the gods, who could see from their vantage above the world. Others suggest they were for the people themselves, symbols reinforcing shared myths and values. And some propose they were both an earthly expression of a cosmic dialogue, a conversation between humans and the universe. The desert preserves them with a kind of fierce tenderness. Here, rain falls perhaps a few times a year, and the stones have remained undisturbed for centuries. But even in this stillness, they are vulnerable. Roads, urban development, and even careless footsteps can scar the lines in ways that take centuries to fade. UNESCO declared the Nazca Lines a World Heritage Site in 1994, recognizing both their cultural significance and their fragility. Efforts to protect them continue, but the desert is wide, and the lines are many. Some figures have been rediscovered only in recent years, thanks to satellite imagery and drones, proof that even now the Nazca Plain still holds secrets beneath its sun-baked surface. There is something humbling in knowing that these designs were made to endure beyond the lives of their creators. The Nazca people are gone, their language lost, their temples eroded, and yet their lines remain, drawn not in ink, but in the very bones of the earth. From above, as the light shifts across the desert, the figures seem almost to stir, the hummingbird ready to take flight, the monkey curling its tail a little tighter, the condor preparing to soar. Whether they are messages, offerings, maps or art, they speak across the centuries in a language we cannot fully translate, but can still feel. Our journey now leaves the dry heat of the desert and dives into cool shadowed waters, off the coast of Japan. Beneath the waves of the East China Sea lie massive stone formations whose sharp edges and terraces stir debate. Are they the work of nature, or the ruins of a civilization swallowed by the sea? Off the southern tip of Japan's Ryukyu Islands, the water shifts from turquoise shallows to a deep, enigmatic blue. Beneath the surface lies a world where sunlight filters down in shimmering ribbons, illuminating the slow dance of plankton and fish. Here, 20 meters below the waves, a massive stone structure waits in silence, an underwater labyrinth of terraces, sharp angles, and monolithic shapes. This is the Yonaguni Monument, first brought to public attention in 1986, when a local diver, Kihechiro Aratek, was exploring the seabed. Expecting to find coral and fish, he instead encountered something that looked startlingly architectural: flat platforms, straight stair-like steps, and walls that rose in clean geometric lines. It was as though an ancient city had been submerged, preserved in the clear waters for thousands of years. The formation is vast, roughly 150 meters long, 40 meters wide, and 27 meters high at its tallest point. It features what appear to be terraces, wide ramps, and angular walls, some of which meet at precise right angles. Divers speak of a main plaza area, a grand staircase, and blocks that resemble massive pillars fallen onto their sides. At first glance, it feels almost impossible that such precision could be purely natural. The mind instinctively reaches for human involvement, a lost city, a ceremonial complex, or perhaps a port drowned by rising seas at the end of the last ice age. One of the leading proponents of the man-made theory is Professor Masaaki Kimura, a marine geologist who has studied the site for decades. He argues that the monument shows clear signs of human shaping, sharp cut edges, tool marks, and patterns resembling roads or causeways. He even suggests that the site may be over 10,000 years old, predating most known civilizations. If true, it would point to a seafaring culture in the region long before the official dawn of advanced societies. But others urge caution. Geologists note that the rock at Yonaguni is sandstone, prone to fracturing along clean horizontal and vertical planes due to natural processes like tectonic activity and erosion. Similar formations can be found on land, where wind and water have carved stone into shapes that appear almost deliberate. The steps may be natural terraces, the walls the result of natural fault lines, splitting the rock into angular blocks. The debate, like the monument itself, remains submerged in uncertainty. For every feature that looks carved, there is another that could be explained by geology. And while some divers report what appear to be carvings of animals or symbols, these are subtle and subject to interpretation. The human brain is quick to find patterns, even where none were intended. Still, there is a magnetic allure to Yonaguni. To descend into its blue depths is to enter a space where the boundary between the natural and the human-made blurs completely. Schools of fish weave through corridors that may be halls or may be cracks in the stone. A turtle glides past what could be a ceremonial platform, or simply a flat expanse of rock worn smooth by the sea. The water muffles all sound except the slow hiss of your own breathing, and time seems to slow to match the pace of the currents. If the monument is man-made, its submergence raises tantalizing questions. Could it be evidence of a coastal settlement drowned when sea levels rose dramatically after the last ice age? If so, who built it, and what else might remain hidden beneath the waters of the Pacific? Such an ancient maritime culture might have left other traces along the drowned continental shelves, now lost to all but the most determined exploration, and if it is natural, then it is no less remarkable. It would stand as a testament to the artistry of geological forces, a reminder that the Earth itself is capable of producing forms that seem almost designed. In either case, Yonaguni captures the imagination because it exists in the liminal space between two possibilities, neither of which diminishes its wonder. Perhaps the real mystery is not whether it was built or born, but how it so perfectly inhabits both worlds, a sculpture shaped by time, whether through the hands of people or the slow, relentless work of the sea. From here, our path rises from the water and moves into the quiet halls of a library, but not an ordinary library. Within its walls rests a book bound in leather, its pages filled with strange looping script that no one has ever been able to read, and illustrations of plants that exist nowhere in the known world. Somewhere in a climate-controlled room, sealed in a protective case, rests a book unlike any other. Its pages are thick, made from calfskin vellum, and bound in a cover that has weathered centuries. The edges are slightly curled, the color warm and faintly golden with age. If you lean close, you can almost smell the quiet centuries it has endured, ink and leather and dust, from a time before your grandparents were born. This is the Voynich manuscript, a work whose beauty is matched only by its stubborn refusal to be understood. The manuscript is roughly 240 pages long, though some sections are missing. Each page is covered in a looping, elegant script that flows left to right, but in no known language or alphabet. Between the lines are hundreds of delicate illustrations, plants that don't exist, constellations drawn in unfamiliar patterns, women bathing in pools connected by networks of pipes, elaborate circular diagrams that seem both mechanical and astrological. The first known record of the manuscript in modern times comes from 1912, when a rare book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich purchased it from the library of a Jesuit college near Rome. But carbon dating of the vellum places its creation sometime in the early 15th century, likely between 1404 and 1438. That means it predates its known history by nearly 500 years, and no one knows who wrote it, or why. The language, if it is a language, has defied all attempts at translation. Cryptographers, linguists, and amateur codebreakers have pored over it for decades. Some believe it is an elaborate cipher, hiding a text in a known language beneath layers of substitution. Others think it might be a constructed language, invented for purposes now lost. A few even suggest it could be a meaningless hoax, the work of a skilled scribe creating the illusion of knowledge to sell to a wealthy patron. Yet statistical analysis of the text reveals patterns similar to real languages, word frequency distributions, structural consistency, and syntax-like repetition. If it is nonsense, it is extremely sophisticated nonsense, crafted with an attention to linguistic realism, far beyond what most forgers would attempt. The illustrations offer clues, but not solutions. Some plants vaguely resemble known species, but with strange combinations of leaves and flowers that make them impossible to identify. The astronomical drawings show stars and moons, but also arrangements of celestial bodies that don't match our familiar sky. The bathing women appear in scenes that seem to blend biology, alchemy, and perhaps ritual, but without context, their meaning is opaque. Over the years, the manuscript has attracted some of the brightest minds in codebreaking. During World War II, cryptanalysts, who cracked enemy ciphers, tried their hands at it, only to leave empty-handed. In recent years, computer algorithms and AI models have analyzed it, producing tantalizing hints, but no universally accepted breakthrough. Every claim of decoding so far has been met with skepticism and inevitably, rebuttal. Part of the allure is that the manuscript's purpose is entirely unknown. Was it a scientific treatise, a medical manual, an alchemical recipe book, a spiritual guide, or was it never meant to be read in the conventional sense, functioning instead as a symbolic or meditative object? There is a strange comfort in its resistance. In an age when we can digitize, translate, and analyze almost anything, the Voynich manuscript remains immune. It sits quietly in Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, as if aware that its power lies in the very fact that it will not yield its secrets. Imagine for a moment the person who made it. By candlelight, dipping a quill into ink, they draw page after page of careful script, each symbol known to them, but to no one else. They sketch plants that only they have seen, whether in a dream, in their imagination, or in some lost corner of the world. They bind it all together, perhaps never telling another soul the full meaning, and then somehow, across centuries, the book finds its way to us, intact but indecipherable. The pages do not hurry, they do not argue or persuade, they simply exist, a kind of parallel reality bound in leather. From here, our journey will take us to a place where mystery is written not in ink, but in stone. Towering walls in the heart of southern Africa, remnants of a kingdom whose history was long misattributed, and whose grandeur still rises from the earth. In the rolling hills of southeastern Zimbabwe, where the air smells faintly of grass and granite dust, lie the remains of a city that was once the heart of a powerful kingdom. The landscape is dotted with kopjes, ancient rocky outcrops rising from the plains, and between them stand massive stone walls curving gracefully across the earth. These are the great Zimbabwe ruins, and they tell a story both magnificent and, for centuries, misunderstood. The name Zimbabwe comes from the Shona phrase, Jimbada Mabwe, meaning houses of stone, and these houses are unlike anything else in sub-Saharan Africa. Built between the 11th and 15th centuries, the walls rise up to 11 meters high and stretch for hundreds of meters without a drop of mortar. Granite blocks, carefully shaped and fitted, interlock so tightly that the walls have stood for centuries against wind, rain, and time itself. There are three main complexes: the hill ruins, which served as the spiritual and political center, the great enclosure, a massive elliptical wall enclosing a tower whose purpose remains uncertain, and the valley ruins, which once held dwellings and workshops. Archaeologists believe as many as 18,000 people may have lived here at the city's height, making it one of the largest urban centers in Africa during the medieval period. The precision of the stonework is striking. In some sections, the walls curve in gentle arcs, following the contours of the land, while in others, they rise in clean, straight lines. The great enclosure's outer wall alone contains more than 15,000 tons of stone, all quarried locally and carried into place by human hands. Inside, the conical tower, solid, without chambers, stands like a silent sentinel. Its purpose is unknown, but theories range from a granary symbolizing wealth to a purely ceremonial structure. Great Zimbabwe was a center of trade and craftsmanship. Archaeological finds include Chinese porcelain, Persian glassware, and Arab coins, evidence of far-reaching connections through the Indian Ocean trade network. Gold mined from nearby rivers and hills was a major export, exchanged for textiles, beads, and other goods from distant lands. Yet for centuries, the ruins were shrouded, not just in mystery, but in denial. When European colonizers first encountered them in the late 19th century, they refused to believe that Africans could have built such monumental architecture. Early colonial archaeologists, driven by racist assumptions, claimed the structures were the work of ancient Phoenicians, Arabs, or even a lost biblical people. It took decades of research and the persistent voices of African scholars to reclaim Great Zimbabwe as the creation of the Shona civilization. The truth, once acknowledged, reshaped the understanding of African history. Great Zimbabwe was not an isolated anomaly, but the political and economic heart of a sophisticated kingdom that ruled vast territories and commanded respect from distant lands. Its architecture was the physical embodiment of that power, walls not for defense, but for impressing, organizing, and defining sacred space. Walking through the ruins today, the air is filled with the scent of dry grass and the sound of wind moving between the stones. In the hill complex, narrow passages twist between towering walls, opening into courtyards, where leaders once met and ceremonies were held. From here you can see the valley stretching below, dotted with smaller enclosures, and the faint outlines of ancient fields. The great enclosure is more open, its sweeping curves drawing the eye toward the conical tower. No matter how many times you circle it, the structure refuses to give away its meaning. It is a reminder that some symbols are meant to be understood only by those who lived within their culture, and that without their voices, we can only guess. There is a quiet dignity to the site, a sense that even stripped of its people and daily life, it still holds its identity. The walls are not ruins in the tragic sense. They have not crumbled into chaos, but rather stand as survivors, intact enough to show the mind and hand that shaped them. For modern Zimbabwe, the site is more than an archaeological treasure, it is a national symbol. The bird carvings found here, stylized soapstone sculptures, are featured on the national flag and currency, tying the present to the legacy of the past. And yet, like so many places in our journey, Great Zimbabwe carries its share of unanswered questions. What ceremonies took place in the Great Enclosure? Why was the city eventually abandoned in the 15th century? Was it environmental decline, shifting trade routes, political upheaval, or some combination of all three? The silence of the stones offers no answer, only the invitation to keep asking. From these dry hills, we now travel to the highlands of Peru, where another set of walls rises, not curved and sweeping, but jagged and massive, their stones so perfectly fitted that even a blade of grass cannot slip between them. High above the red-tiled roofs of Cusco, the old capital of the Inca Empire, the air thins and sharpens with altitude. At over 3,500 meters above sea level, the sunlight is crisp, the shadows deep, and the sky an almost impossible blue. Here on a plateau overlooking the city, stand walls that seem less like human construction and more like something shaped by titanic forces. This is Sacsayhuaman, part fortress, part ceremonial center, and entirely a masterpiece of stonework. The site once formed the northern boundary of Cusco, and though much of it has been dismantled over centuries, what remains is enough to inspire astonishment. The walls are built in 3 great tiers, zigzagging across the hillside, in a pattern that some say represents the teeth of a puma, an animal sacred to the Inca, and symbolically tied to Cusco itself. Each tier is made of massive stones, some weighing more than 100 tons, fitted together so precisely that no mortar was needed. The gaps between them are so tight that even today a sheet of paper or the thinnest blade of grass cannot be inserted. The shapes of the stones defy uniformity. While some are roughly rectangular, others are irregular polygons, with 6, 8, or even more sides. Each fits perfectly with the stones around it, locking the entire structure into a solid earthquake-resistant form. The stones were quarried several kilometers away, shaped with hammerstones, and transported uphill, a feat that seems to demand an engineering genius we still struggle to fully comprehend. Inca masonry was not just about precision, it was about resilience. Cusco lies in a seismically active region, and over the centuries earthquakes have reduced many colonial-era buildings to rubble, yet the Inca walls remain, their interlocking stones shifting slightly under stress, and then settling back into place, absorbing the shock without falling. Standing before them, it's difficult not to wonder how such colossal stones were moved and set into position, without the use of the wheel, iron tools, or beasts of burden, capable of hauling such weight. The standard archaeological answer involves a combination of human labor, wooden rollers, ropes, ramps, and sheer determination. Techniques that, while possible, would have required a scale of organization and effort that boggles the mind. But for every practical explanation, there are alternative theories. Some suggest that the irregular shapes and perfect fits hint at a lost technology, perhaps involving methods to soften or mold stone, a claim for which no physical evidence exists, but which persists in popular imagination. Others tie the site to astronomical alignments, proposing that the zigzag walls mirror patterns in the stars, or serve as markers for solstices and equinoxes. Whatever the method, the result is as much art as architecture. The interplay of light and shadow along the jagged lines of the walls changes throughout the day, and the sheer scale of the construction commands both respect and humility. You can walk along the base and trace the curves of individual stones with your hand, feeling the subtle polish from centuries of wind, rain, and touch. Sacsayhuaman was more than just stone. In its prime, it included towers, ceremonial plazas, and storage buildings. The complex played a role in religious festivals, particularly Inti Raymi, the Festival of the Sun, which celebrated the winter solstice. The site's commanding view over Cusco made it strategically important as well, a final defensive stronghold should enemies breach the city. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they were awed by the scale of the walls, yet much of the stone from the upper structures was later taken and repurposed for colonial buildings in Cusco. What remains today is the foundation, the indestructible base upon which an entire ceremonial and defensive complex once stood. Even in partial ruin, the walls exert a powerful presence. They seem to radiate a quiet endurance, as if they have been waiting patient and unmoved, while centuries of change have swept through the valley below. From the zigzagging battlements, you can look down over modern Cusco and imagine it as it was in the time of the Inca, the city laid out in the shape of a puma, the golden temple of Coricancha gleaming in the sun, processions winding through streets that no longer exist. In that view, Sacsayhuaman is not just a ruin, it is a living link between the present and a world that still pulses beneath the surface of history. And like so many places in our journey, it leaves us with questions. How did the Inca, without the technologies we take for granted, achieve this level of precision and durability? Was it purely the product of human will and ingenuity, or is there something about their methods that has truly been lost to time? From these high walls, we now journey to the humid lowlands of Central America, where the jungle hides another mystery, not walls this time, but spheres, perfectly round, impossibly smooth, and scattered across Costa Rica like the pieces of a forgotten game. In the lush, humid lowlands of southern Costa Rica. The air is thick with the scent of rain and earth. Between the rivers and the fringe of the Pacific coast, where banana plantations now stretch toward the horizon, lie some of the strangest artifacts in the Americas, hundreds of massive stone spheres, each nearly perfect in its roundness. Some are small enough to cradle in your arms, barely a few centimeters across. Others are monumental, more than 2 meters in diameter, and weighing over 15 tons. They rest alone in fields, in clusters along old paths, or partly buried in the earth, as if still waiting to be found. Locals call them Las Bolas, and their origins remain one of Central America's enduring mysteries. The first documented discovery came in the 1930s, when the United Fruit Company was clearing jungle for banana plantations. Workers came across the stones, some arranged in lines or geometric patterns. Many were moved, damaged, or even dynamited, in hopes of finding treasure inside. A tragic misunderstanding, as the spheres were solid stone through and through. They are carved from various types of rock, including granodorite, gabbro, and limestone. Some of these materials occur naturally nearby, while others would have had to be transported from quarries many kilometers away. How they were shaped so precisely, without modern tools, is still unclear. The most accepted theory is that ancient craftsmen used a combination of hammerstones to chip away the rough shape, followed by abrasion with sand and water to achieve the smooth finish. But the purpose of the spheres is even more mysterious than their manufacture. Archaeologists date them to between 500 and 1500 CE, likely created by the Dekis culture, a people skilled in metallurgy, pottery, and monumental sculpture. Yet no written records survive from that society, and by the time the Spanish arrived, the culture had vanished. Some of the spheres appear to have been deliberately placed to align with astronomical events, such as the solstices. Others were arranged in groups, marking the approach to settlements or ceremonial sites. The precision of their placement suggests they held symbolic or political significance, perhaps representing the power of leaders or the cosmological order of the world. There is also a sense of the decorative, of art for its own sake. A perfectly round stone balanced in an open plaza is a statement of mastery over both material and form. In a world where nature rarely produces such symmetry on a large scale, the spheres stand out like deliberate interruptions in the landscape. Some folkloric traditions say the spheres were the weapons of gods or giants hurled across the land in ancient battles. Others believe they contain magic, or that they were meant to guard something hidden deep beneath them. These stories, though not supported by evidence, speak to the human instinct to give meaning to what we cannot explain. Today, many of the spheres have been relocated to museums, parks, or private gardens. Others remain in situ, partially hidden by the jungle, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. In 2014, UNESCO designated the pre-Columbian chiefdom settlements with stone spheres as a World Heritage Site, recognizing their cultural and historical importance. Standing before one of the largest spheres, you can't help but reach out and rest your hand against it. The surface is cool and slightly rough, the curve so flawless it feels almost unreal. Whether these were markers, symbols, or sacred objects, they are the product of immense patience, weeks, months, perhaps years of shaping a stubborn block of stone into perfect roundness, and in their perfection lies the mystery. Why round? Why so precise? Why so many? The answers remain as elusive as the people who made them. The Dekis culture left no temples, no carved stelae covered in explanatory glyphs, just these silent, immovable forms. In the absence of words, the spheres speak through their presence alone. From these green, rain-slicked fields, our journey will return to a dusty patch of Texas soil in the United States, where a 1930s discovery seemed to break the rules of time itself, a modern-looking hammer sealed inside rock supposedly millions of years old. On a summer day in 1936, a couple named Max and Emma Hahn were walking along a creek near the small town of London, Texas. The creek's banks were layered with ancient rock, weathered into soft ridges and pale outcrops. It was there, half embedded in a nodule of stone, that they noticed something strange, a piece of wood protruding from the rock itself. Curious, they took the object home and chipped away the surrounding stone. What emerged was a hammer, a smooth wooden handle, partly mineralized with age, and a head made of solid metal. The head was about 6 inches long, with a blunt hammering end on one side and a narrower wedge on the other, a design not unlike modern hand tools. That alone might not seem remarkable until you consider the claim made by some researchers that the rock encasing the hammer was part of a formation estimated to be more than 100 million years old. If true, that would place the hammer's existence not just before the rise of human civilization, but before the rise of humans altogether, deep in the Cretaceous period, when dinosaurs still roamed the earth. It would be, quite literally, an artifact out of time. Of course, such an implication ignited fierce debate. Some saw it as evidence of a lost civilization that existed long before recorded history. Others used it to support fringe theories about time travel, ancient advanced technology, or even the idea that human history is far older than mainstream science allows. But geologists and archaeologists have offered more grounded explanations. One possibility is that the hammer is indeed a relatively recent tool, perhaps from the late 19th century, that became encased in a concretion of minerals over time. In certain environments, mineral-rich water can cement sediments into solid rock-like formations in decades rather than millennia. The hammer's construction does suggest a more recent origin. The metal head is composed of 96% iron, with traces of chlorine and sulfur, and shows no significant rust despite its age. Unusual, but not impossible, for a tool forged in the last few hundred years. Its shape also closely resembles American hammers used in the late 1800s, particularly by miners and settlers. Still, the image of a modern-looking tool, sealed inside ancient rock, is compelling, and it has kept the London hammer in public fascination for decades. Today it resides in a small private museum, where visitors can see the handle still partly enclosed in the pale, cemented material that sparked so much speculation. Whether it is a case of misinterpreted geological age or something truly anomalous, the hammer is a reminder of how easily the human mind gravitates toward mystery. Even when explanations exist, we are drawn to the possibility, however slim, that we have found a crack in the known timeline. Imagine holding it in your hand, the balance of the head, the feel of the wood where it emerges from the stone. You cannot help but think about the person who once used it, perhaps hammering a nail into timber, perhaps chipping at rock in search of ore. That person lived in a world much like ours, yet here their tool is presented in a frame that seems to link it to an impossibly ancient past. And maybe that is the real lesson of the London hammer. Whether it is truly ancient or simply caught in a peculiar geological trap, it embodies the way history and geology sometimes intertwine in unexpected ways. Objects do not always tell their stories clearly. Sometimes they let us imagine the story we want to hear. From this quiet Texas creek, we will now take a step back, not to another single artifact, but to the broader tapestry they all belong to. Across continents and centuries, each of these 12 discoveries has held our attention because they resist complete explanation. In our next section, we will begin to weave them together, tracing the patterns between these puzzles, looking for the threads that might connect them, and perhaps finding that the greatest mystery lies in the spaces between them. We began in the depths of the Mediterranean, with the corroded gears of the Antikythera mechanism, and we have wandered deserts, plains, jungles, and ocean floors. We have touched stone, metal, parchment, cloth. We have looked at maps that seem to know too much, carvings that speak without words, walls that fit together like puzzles, and books that refuse to be read. Each of these 12 discoveries stands alone in its own place and time, separated by thousands of miles, and sometimes by thousands of years. Yet they share something deeper than coincidence. They are all reminders that history, no matter how carefully we chart it, still has unlit corridors. It is tempting to think of human knowledge as a straight ascent, each generation building on the last, climbing toward an ever clearer view of the truth. But these artifacts are like sudden glimpses of something else, a hidden stairway winding off into shadow, a door ajar where we didn't expect one. They hint at moments when our ancestors knew things or built things that do not quite fit into the neat timeline we keep in our minds. Some of them, like Göbekli Tepe or Sacsayhuaman, speak of skill and organization we did not believe possible for their era. Others, like the Voynich manuscript or the stone spheres, speak in a visual language we cannot decode, no matter how advanced our tools become. Still others, the Piri Reis map, the Baghdad battery, are like whispers from a conversation that was already underway, long before we arrived to listen. We often frame these mysteries in terms of answers we lack, but there is another way to see them, as a testament to the resilience of questions. The fact that something can cross 1,000 or 10,000 years and still hold our attention means it has not just survived, it has endured with meaning intact, even if that meaning has changed. Think of how each of these objects or sites has been carried forward. The Antikythera mechanism survived because it sank with a ship, sealed away under the sea. The Shroud of Turin crossed centuries in cathedrals and treasuries, kept safe through fires and wars. The Nazca lines lay quietly in the desert until pilots happened to look down from the sky. The London hammer sat unnoticed in a creek bed until someone curious enough stopped to pick it up. They are survivors, yes, but also invitations. Each one asks us to participate, to imagine, to fill in the missing pieces, and that act of imagining may be as valuable as any eventual discovery. In this way, the known and the unknown are not opposites, but partners. The known gives us shape, grounding, and structure. The unknown gives us movement, drawing us forward. Without the known, we would be adrift. Without the unknown, we would be still. Perhaps this is why we are so captivated by the balance between them. To stand at the edge of something partially understood is to feel both safe and challenged, both anchored and untethered. In a sense, it mirrors life itself, the certainty of the ground under our feet, and the mystery of what lies just beyond the horizon. As we prepare to leave these places, the wind-swept plateau, the ocean floor, the silent plains, we might realize that the real connection between them is us. We are the common thread. We are the ones who find, preserve, question, and reinterpret them. In every generation, someone will see them anew, with different eyes and different questions, and in that ongoing act, the mysteries remain alive. From here we step into our final chapter, not to solve the puzzles, but to let them rest in our minds, like the last notes of a song. In the stillness before sleep, they become companions, silent watchers from across the ages, reminding us that not all beauty is meant to be explained. Night has fallen over the world of our journey. The sunlit stones and bright waters fade into shadow, and the air grows quieter, as if the earth itself is listening. The 12 discoveries we have visited now stand in their own places again, some in glass cases, some beneath open skies, some under the slow sway of the sea. They are far apart, yet in memory they seem to stand side by side. The Antikythera mechanism, its gears frozen mid-turn. Göbekli Tepe's carved pillars, holding up a sky older than agriculture. The Baghdad battery, a small clay vessel with a possibility humming inside it. The Shroud of Turin, a ghost of an image laid across centuries of devotion. The Piri Reis map, ink tracing coastlines with unsettling confidence. The Nazca lines, etched in the desert, like messages to a god who never answered aloud. The Yonaguni monument, terraces caught in the still tide. The Voynich manuscript, a book that speaks only in dreams. The great Zimbabwe ruins, stone walls curving in quiet defiance. The Sacsayhuaman walls, teeth of the puma, gripping the hill. The stone spheres, perfect and patient in the green silence. The London hammer, a tool and a riddle, locked in stone. Each is a keeper of something we cannot name. And perhaps they do not keep their secrets from us out of malice or indifference, but because the value of a mystery lies in the space it leaves, the space for wonder, for questions, for imagining the lives that once touched them. If you picture them now, you may notice that they do not shout for attention. They do not compete for the loudest claim to truth. They are content to be, to wait, to endure. They are silent watchers of time, not demanding to be solved, but simply existing, as they always have, on their own terms. Maybe that is the deepest lesson they offer, that not every unknown is a problem to be fixed. Some are a reminder that life is richer when it holds a little unanswerable beauty. Close your eyes and see them, one by one. The faint light on the brass gears of the Antikythera mechanism under museum glass. The wind curling through the empty enclosures of Göbekli Tepe. The Baghdad battery, its copper and iron quietly resting as if asleep. The shrouds weave, where the image is so faint it could vanish if you looked too long. The brown ink on the Piri Reis map, curling into shorelines we almost recognize, the Nazca lines, stretching straight toward a horizon you can't see from the ground. The Yonaguni steps, blurred and softened by drifting silt, the Voynich's pages, turning slowly under a scholar's careful hands. The curve of the great Zimbabwe walls, holding their form against centuries of rain. The Sacsayhuaman stones, locking into one another like a puzzle only the past could solve. The smoothness of the stone spheres, perfect even in the jungle's slow reclaiming. The London hammer, half in stone, half in the air we breathe, in their own way. They are all still doing what they did in their own time, holding meaning for someone, somewhere. The meaning has shifted, yes. A temple may no longer be a place of worship, a map may no longer guide a voyage, a tool may no longer be swung, but they continue to serve as anchors to the idea that we have always been curious, always been creators, always been more than the moment we live in. If we listen closely, we might hear them not as a dozen separate voices, but as a chorus, each singing its own note in a song about the human desire to understand, and the equally human acceptance that we may never fully do so, and maybe that's the perfect note to leave the day on. You don't need to resolve every question before you rest. You don't need to know how each stone was moved, or how each line was drawn, or why someone carved symbols into a page no one else could read. You can let the unanswered be part of the beauty. In the darkness beyond your eyelids, the watchers will still be there. They have stood through centuries, some through millennia, and they will stand through many more. Time moves around them like a slow tide, and they remain patient, silent, steady. When you wake tomorrow, the world will still be full of questions, but for now, you can let the weight of them go, knowing they are in good hands, in stone, in cloth, in metal, in the careful care of museums, and in the quiet embrace of deserts and oceans.